Welcome to DC Statehood Today, the show that keeps you informed on the latest DC statehood issues. My name is Denisha Richard. You can watch us online at DCTV.org or DC51.us. You can also follow us on Twitter at DC51Today. Earlier this year, DC Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton introduced a new bill in Congress, H.R. 1291, or the Washington, D.C. Admission Act of 2017. The bill now has 133 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives. The bill will be provided for the admission of the state of Washington, D.C. into the Union. A Senate equivalent, S.1278, was introduced by Senator Thomas Carper with 19 co-sponsors. Both bills seek to make the District of Columbia the 51st state in the Union. Recently, UDC Law Review organized a symposium on the topic DC Democracy during the time of Trump. Panelists included Representative Jamie Raskin, U.S. Senator Paul Strauss, and UDC Law School Dean Ms. Shelley Broderick. Topics covered included strategies to advance statehood for D.C., congressional voting rights for D.C. residents, and pursuing the Tennessee Plan. D.C. Vote carried out an event on the U.S. Senate called My First Lobby Day for D.C. Kids. The kids visited senators' offices and delivered the message of wanting to have their own senators in the District of Columbia. D.C. Mayor Bowser and other elected officials joined the young lobbyists. A number of senators said that they enjoyed the visits from D.C.'s youngest disenfranchised. Earlier this year, multiples turned up to the U.S. Capitol lawn for a tax day protest demanding the release of President Trump's tax returns. Residents in D.C. joined the tax day protest and marched in support of DC statehood. They took this opportunity to remind protest visitors that DC residents pay the highest federal taxes in the nation but lack congressional representation. Protests were also programmed across the country, including in cities New York City, Boston, and San Francisco. The protest started with a rally in front of U.S. Congress and followed with a march to Trump International Hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue, the IRS building, and the White House. President Donald Trump is the first U.S. president in modern history to not release his tax returns. The DC Death with Dignity Act went into effect on February 18, 2017. House Republicans tried to block the measure but ran out of time before it became law. The district's Death with Dignity Act will be implemented on October 1, 2017. Assisted suicide is now legal in California, Colorado, Montana, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington State. D.C. Mayor Bowser has said that the city plans to use funds from the current budget to implement the law. Veterans, elected officials, activists, and community leaders joined Representative Franklin Garcia during Memorial Day weekend for a remembrance ceremony held at the National World War II Memorial. Veterans and others spoke at the event and reminded attendees that DC's fallen heroes and sheroes still lack congressional representation. They highlighted the many Washingtonians that have laid down their lives for the country while being denied voting rights. Currently, D.C. is home to more than 30,000 veterans, and since World War I, more than 190,000 Washingtons have served in the armed forces. And the DC Statehood Commission held a public meeting on July 22nd to discuss current progress on the initiative to make DC the 51st state of the Union. The commission members include DC Mayor Muriel Bowser, DC Councilman Chairman Phil Mendelssohn, Senator Paul Strauss, Senator Michael Brown, and Representative Franklin Garcia. They discussed a number of topics to further DC efforts, including continued outreach efforts to increase support for DC statehood in Congress, approval of funding for the DC statehood congressional delegation, and the need to have a vote in the U.S. Congress for DC statehood before 2018. They also briefly discussed Puerto Rico's effort to become a state. Now stay tuned for the interview segment and hear from individuals making strides in the DC Statehood movement.
Hello, welcome to the DC Statehood Today show. My name is Franklin Garcia, and today we have with us Maria Corrales, who is the head of Fiesta DC and also the immediate past chair of the DC Hispanic Contractors Association. She's also on the board of the National Hispanic Contractors Association. Welcome to the studio, Maria.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and also be a part of the DC Statehood today.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about Fiesta DC.
Yes.
A lot of people think that Fiesta DC is basically only a festival, but I know that Fiesta DC is actually a nonprofit and that they do a number of other events. Can you give us a little bit of the history of the festival and also how Fiesta DC came about and how did you do outreach to the community through the various events you hold?
My goodness, many questions, but I will summarize that Fiesta DC is community-based organization. We reach out to the youth. We make sure that the youth is involved in every single step of our event. When we go and get permits, we hire people from the community for them to go and get signatures for us to be able to get the permit. But to tell you the truth, Fiesta DC was born in 1971 in a very small community in the District of Columbia. Actually, it was done in a parking lot. From there, back in the 80s, it was taken very large, strong force by Eduardo Perdomo, who did the events not only on the heart of Latino community, which is in 18 and Columbia Road, and he took it down to wherever we are right now in Pennsylvania. Then it came Arturo, Coco Bueno, and many other people that I cannot really rely right now. And one of the last presidents was also one of the sons of Eduardo Perdomo, which was Carlos Perdomo. But the history of the event is just going up and going down. And right now, since 2010, who the last chair was Yvonne Rivera, all of us, she got together with all of us and says, come on and let's do it, a very strong event that not only is showing, it's like the report card of the health of the Hispanic community here in the district. You know that to make a festival, you need to have regulations. You go to a board to ask permission. You have to have a budget. You have to be consistent of the things that you do. And that's what Fiesta DC does at the present time. How can I say Fiesta DC became the heart of the community? Because we do also scholarships. We bring the community out there for every single event that we do. We sponsor soccer games, we do scholarships, and right now we have launched Washington, D.C. as the city of the international because we created what it's called country of origin, that we linked Salvador with Washington, D.C. This year we are linking Washington, D.C. with Bolivia. Why? We want to bring tourism to Washington, D.C., but also the district, we want to go and sightseeing in Bolivia. And that's what Fiesta DC is doing. We're bringing the city to the city, the nation's capital, where the cities, everybody has to be here. All the laws are being done here, and we have to be in the map. And that's what we need to do with the statehood. And that's what we tell every single representative that come to our event, that they need to take care of us because they're supposed to be in charge of us, but they are not.
A lot of history there for sure. So tell us, what are some of the attractions that you're going to have this year for Fiesta DC? First, tell us what the dates are. When is the festival? I know this is the festival that attracts as many as 200,000 people. It's probably one of the most prominent festival we have in the whole region, certainly the biggest one for Latino culture. But what are some of the attractions that you have coming this year? And tell our audience the dates and where the festival is going to be taking place. Of course.
September 17 is going to be marking a statement for us. On Constitution Avenue, we will be walking 7th to 14th Street. We're going to be about 15,000 people in the parade by itself. We're bringing, how can I say, culture. We're bringing our ethnicity dresses. Our ethnia is coming today. And this year we have a beautiful pageant from the Indians, and they are going to pay respect to the Indians in the South. And we are also going to have an image of Virgen de los Migrantes, which all of us were migrants in the United States.
So I know that in the community you have a lot of challenges. I know you've been very crucial in working on the DC Dream Act. You also worked on the driver's license for undocumented immigrants in the city. How do you find time to also deal with other issues like DC Statehood?
Very easy. We prioritize, and DC Statehood is priority for us. And I think just going to the meetings and knowing and understanding that DC Statehood is a privilege that we are not having for our kids. I have a 21, a 26, a 19, and they need to have the right to vote, and we need to do it. And it's a priority for all of us. And you're going to have a table.
Thank you, Maria, for being with us.
You're welcome.
Thank you for watching. My name is Franklin Garcia, and my guest has been Maria Corrales from Fiesta DC. Thank you very much for joining us for this segment of DC Statehood Today. Welcome back to the DC Statehood Today show. My name is Franklin. And today we have with us in the studio Hector Rodriguez, who heads DC Latino for Statehood. Welcome to the show, Hector.
Thank you for having me on your show, Franklin.
Wonderful. Well, tell me a little bit about, I know you have a very, very long history in the District of Columbia. Can you tell us a little bit about your history and your background in the city?
Well, after I came out of the military, I came right to Washington, D.C. I served as a Vietnam-era veteran, and I was fortunate that I got my first job, believe it or not, in the Johnson White House, so I'm dating myself. But it was a very exciting time. D.C. was really going through a lot of changes, incredible, forces moving the country. They were impacted right here in D.C. I worked very hard with the Latino community to get the community to participate in the legislative efforts in all kinds of areas of community development, etc. And they were a very active group, actually, very active and very interested in moving things. They participated, for example, in Metro, making sure that they got employed. We also needed Latino police, and we met with the police chief and started to recruit Latino police from other cities into Washington, D.C. Then I worked with something very special that has always remained very special for me, and that was the D.C. Home Rule Act. And I was one of the vice chairmen. There are a lot of illustrious leaders from the black community, the Latino community, and the rest of the community. And I was selected as one of the vice chairmen on the committee to support home rule for Washington, D.C. And at that time, I appeared before the U.S. Senate to plead with our Senate to give us, at that time, full voting representation for Washington, D.C. At that time, my hair was rather darker than what it is today. So you can see it's taken a long time for us to move from a posture of full voting representation to statehood.
Wonderful. And so how are you involving the Latino community in the statehood movement? How do you see them participating? Because I know that there are a lot of challenges in the Latino communities, and a lot of them may not even understand what statehood is about. So the many residents in the city, how are you engaging them?
Well, it's interesting because the Latino community has come a long way in understanding statehood. Sometimes I feel a lot more than the rest of the American citizens in the United States who don't even know that we don't have full representation in the Congress of the United States. I continue to be shocked by that. But the Latino community, I began first of all by setting up the DC Latino Association for full voting representation. At that time, I worked with Mr. Fauntleroy and some of the other leaders. He was, of course, congressman at that time, the representative, and we went for a constitutional amendment and try to get the state legislatures to support us. Some 14 legislatures backed us, but that wasn't enough. And then later, we moved into the statehood movement. All along, I've had Latinos engaged in the movement. Nationally, we had about 25 states that had state coordinators for full voting representation. And now we've moved into the DC Latinos for statehood, and now we have about 10 representatives and building to make that a stronger organization for statehood for DC.
Now, the current mayor, Muriel Bowser, will have a referendum on the November ballot. What is your opinion on that? What do you think about that? She is going to present the Tennessee plan to the citizens of the District of Columbia for a vote. What is your position on that?
Well, my position is that, first of all, she has invigorated the statehood movement, also along with the commissioners like yourself and some of the other commissioners that serve as senators and congressmen that are elected by the people. And so she was able to put together a group of very talented people and lawyers and invigorated the movement. There are some problems, some challenges with that right now, because people want a constitutional convention after we have the statehood vote in November. Some of the old guard, as I call them, worked very hard. I'm one of them. Worked very hard to get us to this point. And so there are some issues right now as to whether they're going to come in full-fledged and support, the referendum. They would like to have a larger state assembly. They would like to have, a legislature that's bicameral, and they would like to have more representatives and in terms of having a better ratio of representatives to constituents. So that has been an issue. The name New Columbia is okay with most of us. And so I think that there is still some work to be done in this. And I'm hoping that, those issues can be worked out. I know that the City Council pretty soon is going to be acting and passing, a resolution in terms of getting that in there. And then the Board of Elections then will put it on the ballot. We're in a rush. Really, to get that before the new administration. Some people feel that maybe we're hurrying it too much. Some people feel that possibly we need more participation from the community. And actually, some people say, well, maybe we should have an election of delegates to then put together the Constitution. All along, I felt that, to me, the key is to get it before the American people. I've always been concerned about it. Many times I've sat with Mrs. Norton up there in the mall and asked visitors coming in if they knew what our plight, and a lot of them did. My basic concern, though, is that the Republicans have held us as de facto political prisoners in Washington, D.C., because they have blocked every bill that has gone before them to give us our freedom. I'm a veteran, and I fought for this country. And as soon as I got to Washington, D.C., my rights were forfeited. And we've had 20 Medal of Honor winner veterans, and over 200,000 veterans have served this country, all from Washington, D.C. So, I have a bone to pick. And we've got to make sure that we have full voting representation in the capital of freedom.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us, Hector. Very happy to have you here. Thank you for watching. My name is Franklin Garcia, and my guest has been Hector Rodriguez from the Latino for DC Statehood movement. Thank you.
Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be her slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, it sure is hot out here in this field this day. Wow. Another day, I'm here on the Pierce Mill plantation in Washington, D.C. Oh, I be picking and shafting the wheat for the mill. Working, 'cause I'm the property of Mr. and Mrs. Pierce. And they call me Sissy Sue. Yeah, I've been on this here plantation ever since I could remember. And that's as far back as I could remember. Oh, I was the property. I worked the fields. My mammy, she gave me one pleasure in life. She gave me this here cloth. This here cloth, she said, came from Africa. And I ain't know where Africa was, but I knew when I put it on, I knew that it was from my mammy. And it had been passed down from her mammy to from her mammy, from her mammy, and maybe even from her mammy. And I didn't know my mammy, so just the idea that this was something she left me when I was a baby. They had breeded her out. And when I was born, they snatched me from her. And I didn't even know her. All I had was what was left for me. Yeah, I worked hard. And when the other people on the plantation would see me with my kerchief on, they would say, oh, you think you something else. And I say, yeah, I got to have some pleasures in my life. And so I wear this proudly. Yeah, we was working all the time. That's all we did was work. But we heard that there was going to be a great war and that the president was about to free us people in bondage, the enslaved people of Washington, D.C. And we was listening, waiting to hear the news. And we heard old Master Pierce. He was sitting, rocking on the house in the chair, and he was saying, ain't nobody gonna take my property. No, they not. I paid for you people. Use my property. And I bet not have nobody coming here trying to tell me what to do with my property. It'd be over my dead body. Well, sure enough, it actually was over Mr. Pierce's dead body, because truly the war came. And when it came, we all ran down to the church, and we heard the people talking about soldiers coming and people freeing us, people of Washington, D.C. And when we ran down to the 15th Street Baptist Church, we went and we was all praying, and we was praying, and we was saying, oh, free us, oh, free us, oh, we couldn't wait. And they kept saying that on April the 16th, the president was going to sign this big bill called the DC Emancipation Act. And we waited. And we prayed, oh, please free us, free us. And finally we heard the bells ringing. And when we heard the bells ringing, we knew that freedom had come. And we began to shout and cry and laugh in the streets. I am free, hallelujah, I'm free. No other bound, no more chains over me. My soul is resting, it's just a blessing. Praise the Lord, hallelujah, I'm free. Oh, and we was just so elated, and the bells was ringing, and people was running in the streets. And I ran back up to the plantation, and I saw the master. He was looking real, real sad. And I saw old Willie Sam. Old Willie Sam. And poor Willie Sam, he was looking pretty pitiful too. And Willie Sam was sitting there, and Willie Sam said, I don't know nothing about no freedom. What I'm gonna do is some freedom. I don't know how to read. I don't know how to write. Matter of fact, I don't know nothing other what the master tell me what to do. I don't know about no freedom. I guess I better just go on back to the plantation and wait for Mr. Pierce to tell me what to do with this here freedom. Well, I looked at Willie Sam, and I looked down that road, and I said, Willie Sam, you might not know what to do with that freedom, but I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get away from as far as I can. And I ran, and I ran, and I ran for my freedom. Yeah. Well, that was in 1863, April the 16th. People in Washington, D.C., 3,100 enslaved people were the first freed, some 9 months before President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This D.C. Compensated Emancipation Act meant that we were the first free, but we're still not free until we free D.C., the last colony. We're still not free until we free D.C., the last colony. Oh, it's a whole lot of people in D.C. who are being taxed without representation. And to say that we were the first free, but we're the last free, the last colony, it means that until all of us are free, none of us are free. And we've come a long way since 1863, but we still have a long way to go. Black folks are still being used as enslaved labor. We're still demanding our reparations. We're still doing everything we can to have freedom, like equal rights and civil rights and housing and education rights. We have a whole prison industrial complex that enslaves us still today. And we're being shot down in the streets in police brutality. So we're still not free until all of us are free. And we're definitely not free here in D.C., the last colony. And so we sing a song simply that, freedom, freedom, what are you gonna do for freedom? Freedom, freedom, what you gonna do for freedom? Freedom, freedom, what you gonna do for freedom? Freedom, freedom, what you gonna do for freedom? Freedom, freedom, are you gonna vote for freedom? Freedom, freedom, are you gonna sign the referendum for DC Statehood for freedom? Freedom, freedom, how you gonna stand up for freedom? Freedom, freedom,
What you gonna do for freedom?
Thank you for watching. You can watch us online at dc51.us or on dctv.org. You can also follow us on Twitter at DC51Today. I'm Denisha Richard, and thank you for watching DC Statehood Today.